What's obvious is that there's a dispute over who will succeed Trump in the United States. He can't be reelected, right? He can't anymore. Unless there's a constitutional coup over there, which I wouldn't even doubt, by the way, who's going to be his successor? It's not very clear. Is it J.D. Vance, who's the vice president? Is Marco Rubio the one? Today, these two compete for the spotlight. Each of them went their own way, right? Marco Rubio, who has become, let's say, aggressive in his politics, and he's very focused on the Latino vote. So the big thing Rubio is going to try to do in this election is to show himself as the guy capable of succeeding Trump and to show that to the Latinos who live and vote in the United States. So what does that include? That includes a lot of Brazilians who live in the United States today in various regions, for example, who are our patriots, right? Our patriots are loving this. And if they vote in the United States, or they can influence their neighbors, because over there, people often go to their neighbors' houses, walk around the neighborhood, the community, right? And talk to people, try to get them to change their minds about voting or convince them to go vote, right? That's one of the main campaign tactics. Many times it's not even about telling people who to vote for, but convincing them to go to the polls and vote. So that's a strength for him. Venezuela, it was no different. It was considered a big political victory for Marco Rubio. He was the one, he was the face most associated with this, right? So they went there, kidnapped Maduro, and took Maduro away. Just imagine the number of Venezuelans and already the second generation living there who wanted to see Maduro come to an end, right? So they vote in the United States, Colombia. Trump supported the candidate's election. Right-wing candidate in Colombia he tweeted about it, right? Paraguay. These are closely aligned governments, including Paraguay, which even opened its territory for the United States to set up bases. So it's almost an automatic alignment here on the border with Brazil, right? Argentina, Milei, don't even get me started, right, guys? So Brazil is a key player in this political game, Rubio's domestic game, right, of the far right. So what's the next step we might see there? Cuba is involved in this situation. Cuba now, last month, a new wave of boycotts started to take effect. And then what was already really bad turned into an absolutely deplorable situation. I think it'd be cool to try visiting Cuba again, even now during the elections. I went there in December and things were already horrible. There was no gasoline, no oil, nothing, which means we didn't have electricity because a lot of the island's power generation is thermoelectric, which depends on oil, right? Since it doesn't arrive, there's no electricity. So they would spread out whatever electricity they had across the island throughout the week. So the eastern part gets a day with electricity, then the other part, then Havana, then downtown Havana, then here, then there. People couldn't get around the city anymore. Public transportation, I didn't see, not even during the day, any buses in Havana, not a single public bus in Havana. Rogerio Ribeiro, thank you for becoming a member. And Marco Rubio is obviously interested in what they call regime change, changing the government in Cuba, right? And then not long ago, I think about a month ago, additional sanctions on top of the blockade came into effect, right? And it's been going on for half a century. And we always think, can it get worse? And it can, right, man? Thanks to BDS and Schmitz, who also became members. So what happened? Two important developments. I'm explaining it quickly to you. The Cuban army, it has something like a company, okay, guys? Let's remember that it's a government that came from an armed revolution, right? So Dina Lemos, thank you for becoming a member too. So of course, the army has a fundamental role in the Cuban government, right? So the army has a company. The army is like an important ministry there, right? Different from here where it's just the armed forces. The army has a central role there, right? And this company, does it do business on the island or is it a partner in international companies? This has been like this historically. Okay, guys, it's not something new. That was the way they set things up there because they also had to strengthen, let's say, the army. They needed money to shore up the army's coffers, obviously, because they had just defeated the United States, right? So the guy wasn't going to stay there. By the way, yesterday I said I was going to do a poll, right? To find out who knows what this little flag here is, right? That I brought from there. So who knows what this is? Do you guys know, chat? Camila, keep checking if people really know. If you know, you know. If you don't, I'll tell you later. So this company had important partnerships, and two of them were fundamental for Cuba, which was already, guys, already messed up. One in the tourism sector and the other in the mining sector. And that was completely wiped out. Look, Bustamante is already tuned in, the Cuban Revolution. But what is the 26th of July, Bustamante? What is the 26th of July? What happened on July 26th? To see the importance of some things that we think are counterintuitive, whoever wants to speak up, I'll explain later. Yeah, the mining sector is very important in Cuba, and it was still operating because there was a Canadian multinational company that dominated the sector there. What happened? In the mining sector, that Canadian company basically pulled out. That company had been there for years. Tourism sector. In the hospitality sector, when Obama started opening up Cuba, remember? And he even visited the island, had lunch there, right? He went to a paladar there, which are restaurants inside people's homes, right? Actually, I went to the same place where Obama had lunch, right? To check it out in December of last year. Yeah, it opened up, it started to open. The United States, actually, let's go back. It's not really about starting to open, right? The United States started to allow Cuba to do business with other countries and private companies because that didn't happen before. Guys, Cuba doesn't really have a restriction on doing private business or doing business with private companies or with governments. No. Cuba is prohibited from doing so. It's forbidden. If Cuba could choose, it would be able to choose, right? So that's it. Yeah, it's a socialist country, but let's do it. In the hotel sector, we're going to open up to international chains, for example. That's what was done. And these international chains, they had a partnership with this company, which belongs to the Cuban Armed Forces. And they also had to leave the country. And who left? Iberostar, which is a hotel chain, if I'm not mistaken, from Spain. The issue is they manage several hotels, including in Varadero, Cuba's most famous beach. Many Brazilians visiting Cuba stay only there, right? And guys, this destroyed everything. The last conversation I had with people who live there, I have friends who live there, people very close to me. And they said, Leandro, did you think it was bad in December? There was no electricity, no fuel, there were no cars, no way to get around the island. You couldn't do anything, hardly any tourists. Cruise ships couldn't dock anymore to bring tourists. A lot of places were closed. People were out on the streets at night. Yeah. You'd go by the bakeries, the pharmacies, and there was no medicine at the pharmacy, no bread at the bakery. People were selling everything on the street, anything you can imagine. It was like the classic war scene. Really, guys, it was a real war scene, a pitiful situation. Now it's worse. People are going to work on foot. And it's not just walking to work here. Like I had to walk 20 kilometers in a day just to get to work. You don't even need to earn, I don't know, $5 a day. When I left there was a person who helped us get around the city, someone who still had a little bit of fuel. Honestly, guys, she almost begged me to give her my sneakers, just so you have an idea, guys. And I'm talking about people with dignity. It's not people who were, on the streets starving. No, these are people with dignity, with jobs and everything, but they're struggling, right? They're struggling. And I didn't give away my sneakers because I only traveled with one pair. I said, man, I can't go back without sneakers, right? I need them for the trip. But still, it made my heart ache. So guys, that's why what these guys are doing, folks, is something evil, right? Well, let's go. Flávio, what game is he playing? Flávio Bolsonaro doesn't have anywhere else to get votes from. That's a fact, which the campaign itself admits. Obviously, they won't admit it publicly, right? Lula in the latest polls since May, if I'm not mistaken. And the latest poll just came out, by the way. I have it open here. It's on the Carta Capital website. There's something interesting happening, which is terrible for Flávio Bolsonaro. Here's Lula's government approval rating. Look, among those who support Lula or consider themselves left-wing, it's stable, it's high, above 80% and stable. All right? Those who are right-wing Bolsonaro supporters, it's stable, high, above 80 and stable. Disapproves, of course. What's the problem here? People who consider themselves independent. Look at this. And this here, guys, when a candidate is in Flávio's position, he's well positioned to possibly make it to the second round, but he's behind in the polls. The gap has increased beyond the margin of error. In other words, he's on a downward trend. You don't know where it'll stabilize. You're falling. You're in free fall. You don't know. You're not the one controlling the parachute, right? This parachute is controlled by events. So you're in free fall in a political dispute. You have to stay in position and wait for the parachute to open. It's a parachute that it opens as events unfold, and it might not open. It might not open. What would it mean if Flavio's parachute didn't open? He would fall face first to the ground and not be the candidate. Is there still time? Yes. The next 15, 20 days or so, because it's at the beginning of August, if I'm not mistaken, or mid-August. That's when it's decided who the candidate is. Who gives the nomination to the candidate? The party. So this decision today is in the hands of the PL. Flávio Bolsonaro doesn't control his own destiny. That's important for us to know. If Valdemar da Costa Neto manages to negotiate with the PL party leaders, with the money people, with the Faria Lima crowd, with the support they need there, that the candidate is not Flávio, it's not going to be, guys. It's not going to be. Flávio's father is the one who's stuck at home. He doesn't have the strength he used to have. He still has a lot of influence. The vote for Bolsonaro is fundamental for the election, but Bolsonaro doesn't have the power he used to have anymore to mobilize, to give speeches, and that changes the situation a lot. A lot. Because if Valdemar blinked with the idea of not making Flávio a candidate, Bolsonaro, if he were free, he would be doing a live stream now. Tomorrow he would be landing at the airport. There would be 5,000 people in front of him, and he would go after Valdemar. And Valdemar would feel obligated to let Flávio run. Today, things aren't quite like that, so we don't know when Flávio's campaign is going to kick off. And when Flávio Bolsonaro's campaign looks at a poll, they don't look at voting intentions right now. Guys, they don't look. Do you know what they look at? Besides other things, the key thing. It's an election. As they say, polarized, right? It's actually a settled election, let's put it that way. Voters already supporting Flávio Bolsonaro are unlikely to change their minds. People planning to vote for Lula are unlikely to change their minds. So where can you look for votes then? Among the so-called independent voters, right? I don't have strong feelings, neither love nor hate, no passion, not for one or the other. Sometimes I just don't care, or I think about politics more analytically. And then I'll decide my vote based on something, let's say, a bit more rational, because a vote is never decided purely rationally. A vote is much more emotional, right? Psychological, psychosocial. It comes from our relationships. It's something else. Let's go. Yesterday's Quest poll. Look here. Voters who consider themselves independent, simple. 57 disapproved of Lula's government. In April, 58. If the guy disapproves, it doesn't necessarily mean he'll vote against. He can disapprove and still vote in favor too. That's fine. I disapprove, but the other one is worse. That can happen, but it's not good, right? It's not good to have almost 60% government disapproval. That's the kind of thing that brings down a candidate. Okay, guys.